The scent of her fear was what woke him. Lucian Dracămir had not stirred from his daylight slumber in 3 centuries without cause. Yet something pulled him from the depths of death's temporary embrace with undeniable urgency. His consciousness returned slowly, aware first of the silk lining against his back, then the ancient wood surrounding him, and finally, impossibly, the thundering heartbeat of a living human mere inches from where he lay. His eyes opened to absolute darkness, the kind only found within a sealed coffin, yet his vision saw perfectly through it. What he found made him go utterly still. A young woman was pressed against the interior wall of his resting place, her body curled as small as possible. One hand clamped over her mouth to muffle her breathing. Even in the confined space he could see every detail of her. Dark auburn hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, wide hazel eyes squeezed shut, and a pulse point at her throat that hammered visibly beneath pale skin. She wore torn black pants and a gray shirt stained with dirt and what looked like blood, though he could tell immediately it wasn't hers. She hadn't noticed he was awake. She was too focused on the sounds beyond the coffin footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving through his private chambers. "Search everything," a gruff voice commanded. "The traitor couldn't have gone far. Lord Constantine wants her found and executed before sunset." Lucian's mind sharpened instantly. These were vampire guards, lower court enforcers by their accent and crude manner. And this trembling human woman had somehow infiltrated the undercroft, the vast network of chambers and halls that existed beneath the modern city above, where vampire society had thrived in secret for millennia and hidden herself in the coffin of their king. The sheer audacity would have been amusing if it weren't so monumentally foolish. He remained motionless, studying her. She was perhaps 23 or 24 years old, with delicate features that would have been pretty if not contorted with terror. Her clothes suggested she worked in the undercroft, possibly in one of the service roles that humans were occasionally permitted to fill. The blood on her shirt and the accusation of treason painted an interesting picture. The footsteps grew closer. The woman's eyes opened, and she seemed to be praying silently, her lips moving without sound. She still hadn't looked in his direction. The coffin was large, built for someone of his considerable height and breadth, but not so large that she could possibly miss the fact that she wasn't alone, unless she thought him truly dead. The footsteps stopped just outside. Lucian heard the guards discussing whether to check the king's private resting chamber, clearly afraid to disturb him. Good, they should be afraid. "Lord Constantine's orders don't extend to waking King Lucian," one guard said nervously. "You want to explain to him why we interrupted his rest?" "The girl couldn't be that stupid," another replied. "No human would dare. This one killed 3 guards and stole classified documents. She's clearly insane." The woman in his coffin flinched at that, and Lucian caught the glimmer of tears on her lashes. Interesting. Guilty conscience, or frustration at false accusations. The guards moved away, their footsteps retreating down the corridor. The woman released a shaking breath, her hand falling from her mouth. She would wait, he decided, until she felt safe enough to try to leave, and then she would discover her mistake. Minutes passed. The woman's heartbeat gradually slowed from its frantic pace to something approaching normal, though fear still rolled off her in waves. Finally, she shifted, preparing to push open the coffin lid. That was when Lucian moved. His hand shot out, catching her wrist in an unbreakable grip. She gasped, the sound sharp and terrified in the enclosed space, and her head whipped toward him. In the darkness, she couldn't see what held her, but he watched her face transform from fear to absolute horror as understanding dawned. "The coffin," he said softly, his voice deep and unused for hours, was occupied. She screamed, but he released her wrist and clamped his hand over her mouth instead, moving with the supernatural speed that made vampires apex predators. In the same motion he sat up, pushing open the coffin lid with his free hand. Dim light from the enchanted sconces filtered into the chamber, his private sanctuary, decorated in dark velvets and ancient stone. He lifted her bodily from the coffin, her struggles as ineffective as a bird batting against a window. Once they were both clear, he set her on her feet but kept his hand firmly over her mouth, his other arm banded around her waist, pinning her back against his chest. "Stop fighting," he commanded, and power threaded through his voice, not compulsion, which required eye contact, but the simple weight of authority that demanded obedience. "I'm not going to hurt you, yet." She went still, though he could feel her trembling. He was suddenly aware that he wore only the black silk pants he slept in, his chest bare, and she was pressed against him with nothing but her thin shirt between them. Her warmth was startling after the death cold of his rest. Slowly he removed his hand from her mouth. She dragged in a ragged breath but didn't scream again. "Turn around," he said. "Look at me." She shook her head frantically. "That wasn't a request." Something in his tone made her obey. She turned in the circle of his arms and he loosened his grip enough to let her step back just one step, keeping her close. Her eyes traveled up his body, taking in the pale skin that marked all of his kind, the lean muscle of his bare torso, the angular features of his face. Before finally meeting his gaze, her breath caught. He knew what she saw. White blonde hair that fell past his shoulders. Eyes that gleamed silver in the low light. The austere beauty that came with 1,000 years of immortality. He was considered striking even among his kind, and humans often found themselves unable to look away. But this woman's expression wasn't awed or entranced. It was calculating. "You're King Lucian," she whispered. "I am. And you are a human who not only entered the Undercroft without authorization but chose my personal chambers, my resting place, as your hiding spot." He tilted his head, studying her. "Remarkably brave or remarkably stupid? I haven't decided which." "I didn't know it was your coffin," she said quickly. "I just needed somewhere they wouldn't look. I'm sorry. I'll leave. You'll stay exactly where you are." He moved past her to a wardrobe carved from black wood, pulling out a shirt and shrugging it on, though he left it unbuttoned. When he turned back, she was watching the door with desperate longing. "Don't even think about it. You'd be dead before you reached the corridor." "You're going to kill me anyway," she said, and her voice broke slightly. "Or hand me over to Lord Constantine, which amounts to the same thing. That depends entirely on whether you killed 3 of my guards." "I didn't." The words burst out of her with passionate intensity. "I swear I didn't. I would never. I couldn't." She wrapped her arms around herself. "They were already dead when I found them. That's how I knew something was wrong. That's why I ran." Lucian leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. "Explain. From the beginning. And know that I'll taste any lies in your blood if you make me extract the truth forcibly." She paled but nodded. "My name is Leela Vane. I've worked in the archives for 2 years, cataloging historical documents and maintaining the records. Tonight I was working late. There's a backlog because the previous archivist retired, and I heard sounds from the restricted section. Fighting. When I went to check, I found 3 guards dead and papers scattered everywhere. Important papers, treaties and territorial agreements from the last summit. And you touched these papers." She hesitated, then nodded. "I was trying to gather them, to keep them safe. But then more guards came, and they saw me standing there with blood on my hands and documents in my arms, and they assumed." Her voice cracked. "They didn't even let me explain. Lord Constantine ordered my immediate execution. I barely escaped." "Constantine." Lucian's eyes narrowed. The nobleman had been growing bold lately, gathering supporters, questioning Lucian's edicts. "He was there at the archives after midnight? He arrived just after the other guards found me. It was like he was waiting for something." Her eyes widened as the implication hit her. "Oh God, he set me up. He killed them and left me to take the blame, perhaps." Lucian could see the logic in it. Constantine had been pushing for harsher restrictions on humans in the Undercroft, claiming they were security risks. What better way to prove his point than to frame one for murdering vampire guards and stealing sensitive documents? "But that doesn't explain why you're valuable enough to frame. You're a human archivist, useful but hardly irreplaceable." She looked away, biting her lip. "There's something else. Something I found a few weeks ago, buried in old records. I documented it properly, noted it in my reports, but I don't think anyone read them. Except maybe." She met his eyes again. There was evidence of financial irregularities. Large sums being moved through accounts tied to noble houses. I couldn't trace all of it, but Lord Constantine's name appeared several times. Now this was getting interesting. Lucian straightened from the desk, moving toward her with fluid grace. She backed up until she hit the wall, but he simply braced one hand beside her head, leaning close enough to see the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. "You found evidence of embezzlement and reported it through proper channels, and now someone wants you dead." He inhaled deeply, drawing her scent into his lungs. Fear, yes, but also honeysuckle soap and the copper tang of adrenaline. No deception that he could detect. "The question is what I should do with you." "Let me go," she breathed. "Please. I'll leave the city. You'll never see me again." "Impossible. If you're telling the truth, you're a witness to conspiracy and murder. If you're lying, you're a traitor who violated my private chambers." He traced one finger along her jawline, watching her shiver. Not entirely from fear, he noted with satisfaction. "Either way, you're far too interesting to simply release." "Then what?" "You'll stay under my personal protection until I determine the truth. If Constantine is orchestrating something, I want to know about it. And you're the key." "Your protection?" She looked skeptical. "You're going to protect me? You're a vampire king. I'm just a human who was brave enough or desperate enough to hide in my coffin." His lips curved slightly. "You interest me, Leela Vane. That doesn't happen often after 1,000 years. Besides, his expression hardened. If someone is killing guards and stealing from my court, they've challenged my authority, that I cannot allow. She searched his face, looking for the trap. What does your protection mean exactly? It means you stay in my private quarters, where no one else can reach you. It means you answer my questions truthfully and help me investigate Constantine's activities. And it means, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, that you belong to me until this matter is resolved. Do you accept? The alternative hung unspoken between them, facing Constantine's guards and certain death. I accept, she whispered. Good, he pulled back, giving her space to breathe. First rule, you don't leave these chambers without me. Second, you tell me everything you remember about those financial records. Third, you do exactly as I say when I say it. Break any of these rules and my protection ends. Understood? Understood. Excellent. Now he moved to his desk, pulling out parchment and a pen. Tell me everything you remember about Constantine's transactions. Names, dates, amounts, every detail. She pushed off from the wall, approaching cautiously. As she began to recite information, Lucian wrote in the flowing script of Old Carpathian, his mind already working through the implications. If Constantine was embezzling and had killed to cover it up, it suggested weakness, desperation even. But it also suggested he had allies willing to commit murder on his behalf. This required careful handling. As Lila spoke, describing complex financial trails with impressive recall, Lucian found himself watching her rather than his notes. She had a quick mind and attention to detail, qualities he valued. She was also remarkably composed for someone who'd nearly been killed and then woken a vampire king by hiding in his coffin. That's everything I can remember clearly, she finished. I'd need to see the actual documents to give you more, which are presumably in Constantine's possession now. Lucian set down his pen. This is enough to begin. I'll have my personal investigators look into these accounts quietly. He glanced at the ornate clock on his mantel. It's nearly dawn, you should rest. She blinked. Dawn? But I thought. She looked around the windowless chamber. Oh, I have rooms that receive sunlight, but they're not in this section. You'll have to sleep here for today. He gestured to a door on the far wall. There's a suite through there with a bed, bathroom, everything you need. The door locks from the inside if it makes you feel safer, though it won't keep me out if I choose to enter. Reassuring, she muttered. He found himself almost smiling. I've already said I won't hurt you. I keep my word. You're a vampire, a predator, yes, and you're in my protection, which makes you untouchable by anyone else, including me in that sense. He moved toward his coffin, preparing to return to his rest. Sleep, Lila. We have much to do when night falls again. She hesitated, then said quietly, Thank you for believing me. For not just, don't thank me yet, we don't know where this leads. But something in her voice made him pause. He turned back to find her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. Go rest. She fled to the suite and he heard the lock click a moment later. Unnecessary but understandable. He returned to his coffin, settling into the silk-lined interior, but found his thoughts occupied by hazel eyes and auburn hair she'd hidden in his coffin. The sheer audacity still astounded him. As death claimed him with the rising sun, his last conscious thought was that Lila Vane was either going to be the solution to his Constantine problem, or a complication he hadn't anticipated, possibly both. When darkness fell and death released its hold, Lucian woke to the sound of movement in his chambers. He emerged from his coffin to find Lila standing near his desk, wearing the same torn clothes, examining the books on his shelves with careful curiosity. She jumped when she noticed him, hand flying to her chest. I'm sorry, I got bored. I didn't touch anything. Just looked. It's fine. He moved to the wardrobe, pulling out fresh clothes, black pants, a charcoal shirt, boots. You'll need different attire. Those are ruined. I don't exactly have spare clothes here. I'll have some scent. He dressed efficiently, aware of her trying not to watch. Are you hungry? She nodded hesitantly. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. He pulled a cord by the door, summoning a servant, and issued quiet orders for food and clothing to be brought. The servant, a vampire, not human, kept his eyes carefully averted and asked no questions. Good. Everyone knew better than to question what the king did in his private chambers. While they waited, Lucian laid out the information he'd gathered through his network of spies during the daylight hours. Yes, he slept, but others loyal to him did not, and they worked tirelessly at his command. Constantine has been in contact with elements of the Eastern courts, Lucian explained, spreading papers across his desk. He's been offering them favorable trade agreements in exchange for support. Support for what? Lila asked, leaning over to examine the documents. For challenging my rule, the words came out harder than intended. There are always vampires who believe the old ways were better. Constantine has positioned himself as their champion. What were the old ways? Lucian glanced at her. Humans as cattle, no protections, no rights, just food sources to be used and discarded. I changed that 3 centuries ago when I took power. Some still resent it. She was quiet for a moment, processing that. So he's not just embezzling, he's planning a coup. It appears so. The murders, the frame job, he's trying to prove that humans can't be trusted in the undercroft, that my policies have weakened us. If he can sway enough nobles to his side, he can challenge you directly. She looked up at him with worry in her eyes. What will you do? Destroy him? Lucian said it simply, as if discussing the weather. But carefully. If I move against him without proof, it looks like tyranny. His supporters will use it as evidence that I've become unstable, dangerous. I need to expose him publicly in a way no one can deny. The servant returned then with a tray of food for Leela: bread, cheese, fruit, soup, and an armful of clothing. Lucian dismissed him quickly, watching as Leela fell on the food with barely restrained hunger. She ate with quick efficiency, and he found something endearing about the way she savored each bite. The clothes might not fit perfectly, but they'll do better than what you're wearing, he said. Change, then we're going out. She paused mid-bite. Out? You just said I can't leave these chambers. With me you can. We're going to the archives. I want to see exactly what you found, and I want to know what else Constantine might have taken or destroyed. He'll have guards posted. He'll know that his king is conducting an investigation. Let him sweat. Lucian's eyes gleamed. Besides, you'll be with me. No one will touch you. She finished eating and gathered the clothes, disappearing into the suite to change. When she emerged, she wore black pants that fit reasonably well and a deep burgundy shirt that brought out the warmth in her skin. Her hair was still tangled, and she'd clearly tried to wash the dirt from her face with limited success. Come here, Lucian said, surprising himself with the offer. She approached warily. He gestured to a chair. Sit. When she did, he moved behind her and began gently working the tangles from her hair with his fingers. She stiffened in surprise. Relax. You can't appear before the court looking like you've been sleeping rough. His fingers moved through her hair with practiced ease, carefully separating knots. You're under my protection. That means you represent me. Appearance matters. I didn't expect. She paused. Vampire kings don't usually play lady's maid. I'm 1,000 years old. I've learned many skills. He found himself oddly pleased to be doing this, enjoying the simple intimacy of the gesture and the way she gradually relaxed under his ministrations. Besides, I used to do this for. He stopped abruptly. For who? She asked softly. Someone. Long ago. He finished with her hair, stepping back. They're presentable. She rose and turned to face him, and something passed between them, a moment of connection, of lowered guards. Then he turned away, shrugging into a long black coat. Stay close to me, he instructed. Don't speak unless I tell you to. And if anyone threatens you, get behind me immediately. Yes, Your Majesty. He paused at the formal address, then inclined his head. Lucian. When we're private, call me Lucian. Lucian, she repeated, testing the name. It sounded different in her voice, softer somehow. They left his chambers and entered the vast network of corridors that made up the undercroft. The architecture was a blend of ancient stone and modern convenience: electric lights hidden in iron sconces, climate control disguised as decorative grating, security systems masked as architectural details. They passed other vampires, all of whom immediately bowed or stepped aside when they saw Lucian, their eyes widening when they noticed Leela at his side. The whispers would start immediately. He knew. The king with a human woman. Speculation would run wild. Let them talk. The archives occupied a massive chamber 3 levels down, filled with shelves that stretched toward a vaulted ceiling. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and preservation magic. 4 guards stood at the entrance, and they straightened immediately when Lucian approached. Your Majesty, one said, bowing. Lord Constantine left orders that the archives are closed during the investigation. I'm conducting my own investigation. Lucian's voice carried absolute authority. Stand aside. They did, though one murmured something into a communication device. Alerting Constantine, no doubt. Good, let him come. Inside, the archives were in chaos. Books had been pulled from shelves, papers scattered across tables, entire sections cordoned off with guard tape. Leela made a small sound of distress at the destruction of her carefully maintained workplace. Show me, Lucian said quietly. She led him through the maze of shelves to the restricted section, where the treaties and sensitive documents were kept. The area was a disaster: broken glass from display cases, overturned furniture, papers everywhere, and in the center, 3 dark stains on the floor where the guards had fallen. Leela knelt beside one of the stains, her hand hovering over it. This is where I found the first one. His name was Marcus. He had a family in the above world, a human wife, 2 children. He worked nights to support them. Lucian watched her grieve for a vampire she'd barely known, and something in his chest tightened. How long had it been since he'd met someone who saw the people rather than just the positions they filled? Where were the documents scattered, he asked. She pointed to a specific area, and he moved to examine it. The filing system was clear even in the chaos. This section held territorial agreements, specifically those involving the Eastern courts. Exactly where evidence of Constantine's dealings would be kept. He was looking for something specific, Lucian murmured, running his fingers along empty slots. Something that could expose him. There was a document, Lila said suddenly, standing. I remember now. A provisional agreement Constantine had drafted, proposing to cede territory in the northern districts to the Eastern courts. It never went through because it violated the peace accords. I flagged it as unusual and included it in my reports. And if that document disappeared, there'd be no proof he'd ever proposed it. Nothing to contradict whatever stories telling his Eastern allies. Lucian's expression went cold. Did you make copies? Of everything unusual? Yes. Digital backups on an isolated system. She hurried to a computer terminal in the corner, one that had somehow escaped the destruction. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, navigating through layers of security. If it's still here, the screen flashed access denials corrupted. He wiped it, she whispered. He wiped everything. Are there other backups? Physical copies? She bit her lip, thinking, maybe. There's an old tradition in the archives. The senior archivist keeps handwritten duplicates of the most sensitive documents in a personal vault. My predecessor might have. Her eyes widened. Marcus, the guard. He was the previous senior archivist's grandson. If anyone knew where that vault was, it's why he was killed. Lucian's voice was grim. Constantine tortured him for the location, then eliminated the guards who might have witnessed it. But I don't know where it is. Marcus's grandfather died before I was hired. If the location wasn't passed on, then we find another way. Lucian pulled out his phone, typing rapid instructions to his investigators. Constantine doesn't know what you do or don't know. That makes you dangerous to him. We can use that. Use it how? Before he could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the archives. Many footsteps, approaching fast. Lucian moved instantly, positioning himself between Lila and the entrance, his body language shifting into something predatory and dangerous. Lord Constantine appeared with a dozen armed guards. He was tall for a vampire, broad-shouldered, with white blonde hair pulled back in a severe style and pale blue eyes that held nothing but cold ambition. His clothing was expensive, his bearing aristocratic, and his expression utterly furious when he saw Lucian. Your Majesty. The title came out with barely concealed disdain. I wasn't informed you would be interfering in this matter. Interfering? Lucian's voice could have cut glass. This is my court, Constantine. I don't require your permission to investigate crimes committed within it. Of course not, Your Majesty. But the matter is well in hand. The traitor has been identified. His eyes found Lila behind Lucian, and something vicious flashed across his face. And there she is. Seize her. The guards moved forward, but Lucian raised one hand, and they froze. The power radiating from him was palpable, pressing against everyone in the room like a physical force. You will not touch her, Lucian said softly. She is under my personal protection. She murdered 3 guards and stole. She is accused of those crimes. There's a difference. Or have you forgotten that even in our society the accused deserve investigation before execution? Constantine's jaw tightened. The evidence is clear. She was found standing over the bodies with blood on her hands and documents in her possession. Circumstantial, tell me. Constantine, where were you when these guards were killed? I was in my chambers, which multiple servants can verify. Interesting. Because I have witness statements that place you near the archives approximately 20 minutes before the bodies were discovered. A lie, but Lucian delivered it with absolute confidence. Care to explain that discrepancy? For just a moment Constantine's composure slipped. Fear flickered in his eyes before he mastered it. Your witness is mistaken, perhaps. Or perhaps there's more to this situation than you've revealed. Lucian took a step forward, and even Constantine, who was only 2 centuries younger, retreated. I'm taking personal charge of this investigation. All evidence, all testimonies, all documents will be turned over to my private investigators. And if I find that anyone has tampered with evidence or provided false testimony, his voice dropped to something lethal. I will not be merciful. You would believe a human over me? Constantine's voice rose. This is exactly what I've warned about. Your soft policies, your protection of these creatures, it's made us weak. Made you weak. The guards tensed. This was open challenge, the kind that demanded response. Lucian moved so fast that even vampire eyes struggled to follow. One moment he stood 10 feet from Constantine. The next his hand was locked around the nobleman's throat, lifting him off the ground. Constantine clawed at Lucian's grip uselessly. Weak? Lucian's voice was utterly calm. Shall I demonstrate how weak I've become? He threw Constantine across the room. The nobleman crashed into a bookshelf, wood splintering under the impact. Before Constantine could recover, Lucian was there, hauling him up. I have ruled for 300 years, Lucian said, his voice carrying to every corner of the archives. I ended the blood wars. I established peace with the Eastern courts. I brought prosperity to our people. And you dare question my strength? He released Constantine, who slumped against the broken shelving, gasping unnecessarily, a vampire habit from living days. You have 3 days, Lucian continued. 3 days to provide me with a full accounting of your activities, your finances, and your communications with foreign courts. If you refuse, or if I find deliberate obstruction, I will invoke my right as king to examine your mind directly. Do you understand? Constantine nodded weakly, hatred burning in his eyes. Good. Now get out of my sight. The nobleman fled with his guards, leaving Lucian standing among the wreckage, his chest heaving slightly with emotion. Slowly the predatory energy faded, and he turned back to Lila. She stood frozen, eyes wide, and he realized she'd just witnessed exactly how dangerous he could be, how monstrous. The thought sent an unexpected pang through him. Leela, that was incredible, she breathed, and he stopped short. The way you completely dominated him. He's been terrorizing everyone, acting like he owns the Undercroft, and you just... She was grinning, actually grinning. He looked like he was going to wet himself. Lucian stared at her. You're not afraid of you? After you just protected me from a dozen armed vampires? She shook her head. No, I'm grateful. And maybe a little in awe, but not afraid. Something shifted in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. He reached for her, cupping her face in his hands, and she didn't flinch away. You're remarkable, he said quietly. Do you know that? Her cheeks flushed, and her heartbeat quickened, but not from fear this time. I hid in your coffin because I was terrified and not thinking clearly. That's not remarkable. That's panic. You survived. You found your way to the one place in the entire Undercroft where you'd be safest, even if you didn't know it at the time. That's instinct, intelligence. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Remarkable. She swallowed hard, her eyes searching his face. Lucian, a sound from the entrance made them both turn. A young vampire stood there, one of Lucian's personal messengers. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. You had be informed if there were developments. Marcus's widow has come forward. She says she has information about the archives. Lucian released Lila immediately. Though his hand found hers, their fingers tangling together. Bring her to my private study. We'll meet her there. The messenger bowed and vanished. Lucian led Lila through the corridors, aware of every eye that followed them, every whispered conversation that started in their wake. His court would be buzzing with speculation by morning. His private study was different from his chambers, less personal, more formal, with maps on the walls and a massive desk covered in paperwork. He settled Lila in a chair near the fire before taking his own seat behind the desk. Marcus's widow arrived minutes later, escorted by guards. She was human, in her 30s, with tired eyes and the worn look of recent grief. She clutched a small box to her chest. Your Majesty, she said, curtsying awkwardly. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't know where else to go. You're welcome here. Please sit. Lucian gestured to another chair. You have information about your husband's death? She nodded, tears already forming. Marcus came home the night before it happened. He was scared. Said things were getting dangerous at the archives, that Lord Constantine had been asking questions about old documents, about where certain records were kept. Marcus wouldn't tell him his grandfather made him swear to protect the archive's secrets. She opened the box, revealing a small key and a folded piece of paper. He left these with me. Said if anything happened, I should bring them to you. Only you. Lucian took the items carefully. The paper contained a series of numbers and symbols, coordinates, he realized, written in the old archive notation. The hidden vault, Lila breathed, reading over his shoulder. Your husband knew where it was. His grandfather told him on his deathbed. Marcus was supposed to pass it on to the next senior archivist, but after what happened, the woman's voice broke. He's really dead, isn't he? This isn't some mistake. I'm sorry, Lucian said, and meant it. Your husband died protecting something important. His honor will be remembered. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Just promise me you'll stop whoever did this. Don't let it be for nothing. You have my word. After she left, Lucian studied the coordinates while Leela paced the study, her mind clearly working. These numbers lead to somewhere in the old sections, she said. The parts of the Undercroft that date back to the founding. Some of those passages haven't been opened in centuries. Then we go tonight now before Constant realizes what we have. Lucian stood, moving to a cabinet and removing several items: flashlights, a crowbar, a knife with a silver-etched blade. These old sections can be dangerous. Cave-ins, unstable structures, sometimes worse things. The Undercroft is old, Lila, very old. Not everything that lives down here is civilized. She paled but lifted her chin. I'm still coming. I wouldn't leave you behind. He handed her a flashlight and tucked the knife into his belt. Stay close. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. They left through a concealed exit from his study, entering passages that showed their age in crumbling stone and ancient mortar. The air grew colder as they descended, leaving behind the climate-controlled comfort of the inhabited sections. Their footsteps echoed strangely, and Leela moved closer to Lucian instinctively. He found himself hyper-aware of her presence, her warmth, her breathing, the quick rhythm of her heart. Every protective instinct he possessed was focused on her, a sensation both familiar and strange. He'd protected others over his long life, but this felt different, more intense, more personal. How did you know? Lila asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. About Constantine, I mean. How did you know I was telling the truth? I've ruled for a long time. You learn to read people, their sense, their micro-expressions, the tells that betray deception. He glanced at her. And you smelled of fear and desperation, but not guilt. Guilt has a distinctive scent, bitter and complex. You didn't have it. You can smell emotions. To a degree. Strong ones, anyway. They turned into a narrower passage, and he had to duck slightly. I could smell your fear when you hid in my coffin. It's what woke me. But underneath the fear was determination. You were terrified, but still fighting, still trying to survive. That told me more than any words could. She was quiet for a moment. What do I smell like now? He paused, drawing in a slow breath. Curious, anxious. But also, he stopped himself, not sure he should continue. Also what? Also like you're not entirely immune to my presence. He said it carefully, watching her reaction. Your heartbeat changes when I'm close, your pupils dilate, your scent shifts to something warmer. Her cheeks flushed deep red. That's private, I apologize, you asked. But he was fighting a rare urge to grin. Her flustered reaction was adorable, and that thought alone should have concerned him. He was a king, a predator, a being who'd lived through empires. He shouldn't find a human woman adorable, yet he did. They reached a junction where 3 passages met, and Lucian checked the coordinates. This way. The passage grew even narrower, the ceiling lowering until even Leela had to bend slightly. The walls showed strange carving symbols from before his time, from the first vampires who'd built these chambers. He traced one with his fingers, feeling the age in the stone. What do they mean? Lila asked. Protection wards, mostly. Warnings. Here sleeps death is a common one. He moved forward carefully. The founders were more dramatic than modern vampires. They liked mystery and fear, as opposed to now, when you're all so approachable and friendly. He did grin then. You're developing quite the sense of humor for someone who was terrified of me yesterday. That was before I watched you throw Lord Constantine across a room. Now I know you're scary, but you're scary in my favor. That makes all the difference. They emerged into a larger chamber, and Lucian's flashlight beam caught stone shelves carved into the walls, many still holding ancient scrolls and books. In the center stood a locked iron chest, its surface covered in more of the old symbols. This is it, Lila breathed. The hidden vault. Lucian approached carefully, examining the chest for traps. Finding none, he used the key Marcus's widow had provided. The lock was stiff with age, but it turned, and the lid opened with a groan of protesting metal. Inside were documents, hundreds of them, carefully preserved in protective sleeves. Leela reached in reverently, pulling out the first batch. Treaties. Original copies from the founding of the Undercroft. She handled them with expert care. These are priceless. Historical treasures. Lucian was already sorting through others, looking for anything related to Constantine or the Eastern courts. He found it near the bottom, a slim folder containing correspondence and contracts, all bearing Constantine's seal. Here, he said, opening it. His expression darkened as he read. It's worse than I thought. He hasn't just been embezzling. He's been selling information about our defenses, our population numbers, our security protocols. Everything an invading force would need invading? Lila moved to read over his shoulder. He's planning to help the Eastern courts invade? In exchange for governorship of the conquered territory. He'd rule the Undercroft as their puppet. Lucian's hands tightened on the papers, nearly tearing them. This is treason of the highest order. These documents give me legal cause to execute him immediately. Then let's go back, show the court, end this. But Lucian was frowning. It's too convenient. Why would Constantine leave such damning evidence in an archive he knew existed? Even if he didn't know the exact location, he's too careful for this. As if in answer, a sound echoed through the chamber, the scrape of stone on stone. followed by footsteps. He followed us, Lucian said grimly. Or he knew we'd come here eventually. Either way, he thrust the documents at Leela. Take these. There's another passage behind that far shelf. It's narrow, but you'll fit. Follow it up until you reach the inhabited levels. Give these to my chief advisor, Lord Darius. Tell him everything. He'll know what to do. I'm not leaving you. You have to. Those documents are the only proof we have. If we both die here, Constantine wins. He gripped her shoulders. Please, Lila, this is bigger than either of us. Go. The footsteps were getting closer. Lila's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, clutching the documents. Don't die. I'm 1,000 years old. It would take more than Constantine to kill me. He kissed her forehead quickly, surprising them both. Now go. She ran for the hidden passage, squeezing through the narrow opening just as the first guards entered the chamber. Lucian heard the scrape of her movement fading, carrying her to safety, and allowed himself a moment of relief. Then he turned to face his enemies. Constantine entered with at least 20 guards, all armed with silver-edged weapons. The nobleman looked triumphant, his earlier fear replaced with cruel confidence. Your Majesty, he said mockingly, how convenient of you to isolate yourself so thoroughly. These old chambers are quite remote. No one will hear anything that happens here. Do you really think you can kill me, Constantine? Lucian's voice was utterly calm. You're barely 2 centuries old. I've forgotten more about combat than you'll ever learn. Oh, I don't need to kill you myself. That's what I have numbers for. Constantine gestured, and the guards spread out surrounding Lucian. I'll admit you were more clever than I expected. Finding the widow, locating the vault. But it doesn't matter. Once you're dead, I'll retrieve those documents and burn them, and the human girl shall have a tragic accident shortly after. No witnesses, no evidence. You've confessed to treason, you realize that. To whom? You won't live to repeat it. Constantine smiled coldly. I've been planning this for decades. Every step, every contingency. Did you really think your pathetic policies would last? That vampires would accept being weakened forever? You're a relic, Lucian. Your age makes you obsolete. Lucian sighed. You know, I've heard this speech before, multiple times over the centuries. It never gets more original. He began unbuttoning his shirt cuffs, rolling up his sleeves methodically. And it never ends the way the speaker hopes. Kill him, Constantine ordered. The guards attacked in coordinated waves, their silver weapons flashing. Lucian moved like water, like smoke, like death itself. His speed was beyond anything the younger vampires could match, his strength devastating. He broke necks, shattered bones, turned their own weapons against them with brutal efficiency. Silver cut him shallow slashes across his arms, his chest, but he ignored the pain. The burning that made younger vampires scream. Pain was old, familiar. He'd learned to fight through it centuries ago. Within minutes, half the guards were down. The others hesitated, seeing their companions broken and bleeding, watching their king fight like the ancient predator he was. Again, Constantine shrieked. All of you! He's one vampire! They came again and again. Lucian destroyed them, but there were so many and even his supernatural healing couldn't keep up with the accumulating damage. Silver burns, deep cuts, a blade that scraped bone in his side. He was winning, but slowly. Too slowly, then a rumble shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling and cracks spread across the walls. The fighting had destabilized the ancient structure. The chamber's collapsing, one of the guards shouted. I don't care. Constantine grabbed a fallen sword. We finished this. He lunged at Lucian, and for a moment they were locked together, blade between them, vampire against vampire in the oldest form of combat. Constantine was younger, less damaged. Lucian was far more skilled, but bleeding from a dozen wounds. The ceiling groaned ominously. Even if you kill me, Lucian said through gritted teeth, you lose. The documents are gone. The truth will come out. Not if your advisor meets an accident too. Not if everyone who knows dies in this convenient collapse. Constantine shoved harder against the blade. Your legacy ends here in the dark like it should have centuries ago. Another rumble. Larger chunks of stone falling now. Lucian made his decision. With a surge of strength born of desperation, he twisted the blade, disarming Constantine, and drove his fist into the nobleman's chest. Not a killing blow, not yet. He needed Constantine alive for trial, but the movement cost him. One of the guards, seizing the opportunity, drove a silver dagger deep into Lucian's back, piercing upward toward his heart. Lucian gasped, the pain sudden and overwhelming. Silver that close to the heart was lethal even for him. He spun, breaking the guard's neck on instinct, but the damage was done. He was dying. The chamber chose that moment to truly collapse. The ceiling gave way with a deafening roar, massive stones falling like rain. Vampires screamed, running for exits that were already blocked. Lucian's vision was fading. The silver was spreading its poison through his system, shutting down his ancient heart. He'd survived 1,000 years, survived wars and betrayals and the long centuries of loneliness, and he was going to die in a collapsed chamber, never seeing Lila again. The thought bothered him more than it should. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the ceiling falling, and the strange thought that at least she was safe, at least he'd managed that. Lila ran through the narrow passage, tears streaming down her face, clutching the documents like they were the most precious thing in the world. Because right now they were what Lucian had sacrificed himself to protect. She emerged into a familiar corridor and immediately started shouting for help. Guards appeared, weapons drawn, but she didn't care. "Lord Darius," she screamed. "I need Lord Darius now. The king is in danger." They tried to restrain her, but she fought them with desperate strength. "Listen to me. Lord Constantine is a traitor. He's trying to kill King Lucian. You have to help him." Finally, an older vampire with silver hair and kind eyes pushed through the guards. "I'm Darius. What's happened?" She thrust the documents at him, words tumbling out in a rush. "Constantine's planning a coup. These are the proof correspondence with the Eastern courts, plans to invade. He killed the guards in the archives. He framed me, and now he's trapped Lucian in the old sections," and a distant rumble shook the floor beneath them. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Darius's face went white. "Cave in. Where exactly?" "I don't know the name. The hidden vault in the old passages beneath the archives." She grabbed his arm. "Please, you have to send help. He's fighting alone against 20 guards. Darius was already shouting orders, sending guards running in multiple directions. He opened the folder she'd given him, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is more than enough," he said quietly. "Enough to execute Constantine 10 times over. But first we save our king." He looked at Lila with new respect. "You did well. He chose his protection wisely. I didn't do anything. I ran while he stayed to fight. You did exactly what he needed you to do. You saved the evidence. Now let us save him." They rushed through the corridors, Darius gathering more guards as they went. By the time they reached the old sections, a small army followed them. But when they arrived at the passage that led to the hidden vault, they found it completely collapsed, tons of stone blocking the way. "No," Lila whispered. "No, no, no, we dig," Darius ordered. "Everyone, now." They dug with hands and tools, vampires using their strength to move stones that would have required machinery in the human world. Minutes passed like hours. Lila worked alongside them, her human strength negligible but her determination absolute. Finally, they broke through, clearing enough space to enter. The chamber beyond was devastated, the ceiling gone, rubble everywhere, and bodies. So many bodies. Lila scrambled over the wreckage, searching desperately. "Lucian, where are you?" Darius was checking the fallen vampires. Most were dead, some were critically injured, and then "Here," he called. "I found him." Lila ran to where Darius knelt beside a partially buried figure. They worked together to clear the stones, revealing Lucian's pale form. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, but vampires didn't need to breathe. What terrified Lila was the absolute stillness, the way his skin had taken on a grayish cast, and the silver dagger still lodged in his back, inches from his heart. "Is he?" She couldn't finish the question. Darius pressed his fingers to Lucian's neck, checking for the faint pulse that vampires maintained. "He's alive. Barely. But the silver is killing him." He looked at the gathered guards. "Get him to the healing chambers now, and find the court physician. Tell her to prepare for silver poisoning." They lifted Lucian carefully, and Lila followed, refusing to leave his side. They carried him through the corridors at vampire speed, moving so fast that Lila struggled to keep up. By the time they reached the healing chambers, she was gasping for breath. The physician was already there, an ancient vampire woman with white hair and steady hands. She took one look at Lucian and began barking orders. "Clear the room. Everyone out except essential personnel." "I'm staying," Lila said. The physician looked at her. "You're human. You'll be in the way." "She stays," Darius said quietly. "She's his. He'll want her here when he wakes." "If he wakes," hung unspoken in the air. The physician nodded curtly and turned to her work. What followed was hours of careful, agonizing treatment. Removing the dagger which caused Lucian's body to convulse despite his unconscious state. Flushing the silver from his system with ancient blood rituals. Stitching the terrible wounds. Feeding him donated blood from multiple sources to help his healing. Through it all, Lila sat in the corner, watching, praying to gods she wasn't sure she believed in. She'd known Lucian for less than 2 days, but the thought of losing him felt like losing something essential, something that had been missing from her life until she'd found it. Dawn came and went. The physician worked through the daylight hours, though Lila could see the strain it caused her. Finally, as afternoon faded toward evening, she stepped back. "I've done all I can. The silver is out of his system, and his wounds are healing. But the damage was severe. Whether he wakes?" She shook her head. That's up to him now, and perhaps up to what he has to wake for. She left, and Leela found herself alone with Lucian's unconscious form. He'd been moved to a bed, his bare chest wrapped in bandages, his face peaceful but too pale. She pulled a chair close and took his hand. "You have to wake up," she whispered. "You have to. Because we haven't finished this yet. Constantine is still out there. Darius has guards searching, but they haven't found him. And there's so much I need to say to you. So much I didn't get to say." She paused, gathering courage. "I know this is crazy. I've known you for 2 days. But when you told me to run, when you stayed to fight alone, I realized something. I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I've just found," her voice broke. "Not when I've just found someone who makes me feel like I matter. Like I'm worth protecting. Worth dying for." She laid her head down on the bed beside him, still holding his hand. "Please wake up, please." Hours passed. Evening became night. Other vampires came and went. Darius checking on his king. The physician monitoring progress. Guards reporting the search for Constantine. Leela stayed, refusing food and rest, just holding Lucian's hand and willing him to live. It was near midnight when she felt his fingers twitch against hers. Her head shot up. Lucian, his eyes opened slowly, the silver irises unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found her face. "Leela," he breathed, his voice rough. "You're safe?" "I'm safe." "You nearly died." Tears were streaming down her face again. "You idiot, you stayed behind to fight 20 vampires while stabbed with silver. Had to make sure you got away." His hand tightened on hers. "The documents? Safe. Darius has them. He's already started the process to bring charges against Constantine, formal treason, murder, conspiracy with foreign powers. The court is in an uproar, but the evidence is undeniable." "Good." He started to sit up, then gasped as pain shot through him. "Don't move." Lila pushed him back down gently. "You're still healing. The physician said you need rest. I'm the king. I don't have time for rest when what? When you're too weak to stand." She glared at him through her tears. "Darius is handling things. The court is loyal. Let them do their jobs while you heal." He stared at her for a long moment, then did something that surprised them both. He laughed, a rough, pained sound, but genuine. "When did you become so commanding?" "When you nearly died and scared 10 years off my life." She wiped her eyes. "Don't ever do that again." "I'll do my best." His expression softened. "You stayed all this time?" "Of course I stayed. Where else would I be?" He pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. Most humans would have run the moment they had the chance. Gone back to the surface world, left vampire politics behind. Most humans didn't sleep in your coffin, or watch you fight for them. Or she stopped, blushing. "Or what? Or fall for a 1,000-year-old vampire king," she finished quietly. Silence stretched between them. Then Lucian tugged her hand, pulling her closer. "Come here." She leaned down and he cupped the back of her neck, bringing her face to his. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, questioning, then deeper as she melted into him. His other arm came up around her waist, holding her close despite his injuries. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I'm not supposed to feel this," Lucian said softly. "After so many centuries, I thought I was done with these kinds of emotions. But then you appeared in my coffin, terrified and brave and so very alive, and everything changed." "I thought you were going to kill me," she admitted. "And then you protected me instead. And then you were kind and strong, and you listened when I spoke and treated me like I mattered. How could I not fall for that? You matter more than you know." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "When I thought I might die in that chamber, my last thought was of you, of not seeing you again. That's when I knew what? That somehow impossibly I'd fallen in love with a human woman who broke into my coffin." Leela laughed and cried at the same time. "That's the most ridiculous love story ever, perhaps, but it's ours." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. "Stay with me, not just tonight, not just until this crisis passes. Stay. I'm human, you're immortal. That's our complication. Then we'll face them together." His voice held absolute certainty. "I've lived 1,000 years, Lila. I can wait a few decades, centuries if necessary, to figure out how to make this work. But I won't let you go, not now." "That's very presumptuous of you, Your Majesty." "It is. Do you object?" She pretended to think about it. "I suppose I can tolerate being courted by a vampire king. Someone has to keep you from getting stabbed with silver." He was about to respond when the door burst open. Darius entered, his expression urgent. "Lucian, thank the ancestors you're awake. We have a situation." Lucian sighed but didn't release Lila. "Constantine, cornered in the eastern tunnels. He has hostages 3 human servants. He's demanding safe passage to the eastern courts in exchange for their release." "How very predictable of him." Lucian started to rise, and this time Lila didn't stop him, though she stayed close in case he needed support. "Gather my personal guard and bring me weapons." You can barely stand, Lila protested. I'm healing rapidly now that the silver is out, and this ends tonight. His eyes were hard. Constantine threatened my court, my people, and you. That I cannot forgive. Within minutes, Lucian was dressed in combat gear, silver-resistant armor over black clothing, weapons strapped to his body. He looked every inch the warrior king, despite the pallor of recent injury. Lila watched him transform from the vulnerable patient to the dangerous predator she'd first glimpsed. I'm coming with you, she announced. Absolutely not. He's using human hostages. They'll be terrified. They might need someone human to help calm them once you've dealt with Constantine. Lucian looked like he wanted to argue, but Darius nodded. She has a point, and she'll be safer with us than left behind. If Constantine has other conspirators, they might target her. Fine, but you stay behind me at all times. Understood? Understood. They moved through the undercroft in a tight formation, Lucian at the center, surrounded by his most elite guards, with Lila protected in the middle. They reached the eastern tunnels to find them sealed off, guards positioned at every entrance. He's in the old waterworks, one guard reported. No other exits. He knows he's trapped and the hostages alive last we checked, but he's threatening to kill them if we advance. Lucian studied the sealed entrance. Open it, but slowly. I'll go in alone. Sir, that's not a suggestion. Power thrummed through his voice. He wants to negotiate with me. Let him. They broke the seal, and Lucian entered the tunnel alone, moving with fluid grace despite his recent injuries. Lila watched him disappear into the darkness, every instinct screaming at her to follow. He'll be fine, Darius said quietly beside her. I've seen him fight for 3 centuries. Constantine is outmatched, even injured. Inside the tunnel, Lucian found Constantine in the central chamber of the old waterworks. The nobleman looked haggard, desperate, his expensive clothes torn and filthy. 3 humans knelt before him, bound and gagged, his hand on the shoulder of one. Ah, there you are, Constantine said with false cheer. I was beginning to think you'd died. Pity you didn't. Release them, Constantine. It's over. It's over when I say it's over. Constantine's composure cracked. You've ruined everything. Decades of planning. All destroyed by one meddling human and your pathetic sentimentality. You ruined yourself when you chose treason. Treason? I was trying to save our species. Your weakness has made us vulnerable. Humans knowing our secrets, walking our halls, working in positions of trust. It's insanity. Or evolution. Lucian moved closer, his movements casual but calculated. The world has changed, Constantine. We change with it or we die. That's always been the way. You've forgotten what we are. Predators, kings of the night. We shouldn't bow to humans or coddle them, or his eyes widened in realization. Her, that archivist, you've fallen for her. That's what this is really about. This is about you murdering my subjects and selling our secrets to foreign powers. Don't try to make it noble. If you'd just maintained the old ways, none of this would have happened. But no, you had to be enlightened, progressive. Constantine spat the words like curses. You've made yourself weak, then it should be easy for you to defeat me. Lucian spread his arms. Here I am, injured, weakened by silver, distracted by human concerns. Strike me down. Constantine's hand tightened on the hostage's shoulder, and the woman whimpered through her gag. Release me first. Guarantee my safe passage. I guarantee nothing to traitors. Then these humans die, and then you die seconds later. Is that really how you want this to end? A long pause. Constantine's expression cycled through rage, fear, and finally desperate calculation. What if I could give you something? Information about other conspirators, plots you don't know about. You mean your co-conspirators whom you'd betray to save yourself? Lucian shook his head. That only proves you're a coward as well as a traitor. Very well. Give me the names. First guarantee. Lucian moved. One moment he stood 20 feet away. The next, he had Constantine by the throat, lifting him off the ground. The hostages scattered, crawling away from the confrontation. I'm done negotiating, Lucian said coldly. You killed innocent people. You betrayed your king and your court. You stabbed me in the back literally. And worst of all, you threatened someone under my personal protection. Give me one reason I shouldn't end you right now. Constantine clawed at Lucian's grip, unable to speak. His eyes bulged with terror. I thought not. Lucian's grip tightened. By my authority as King of the Undercroft and High Lord of the Western Courts, I declare you guilty of high treason, murder, and conspiracy with enemy powers. The sentence is death. Wait. Constantine managed to choke out. Please, I was following orders. Someone higher up wanted this, I can give you. But Lucian's expression had gone remote. There is no one higher than me, and even if there were, you made your choices. You lived by the old ways. Die by them. He twisted sharply, and Constantine's neck broke with an audible crack. The nobleman went limp, and Lucian dropped the body contemptuously before turning to check on the hostages. They were terrified, backing away from him despite his gentle tone. You're safe now. I won't hurt you. But they couldn't see past the predator who'd just killed someone with his bare hands. Lucian's expression tightened with old pain. This was why he'd kept his distance from humans for so long. They could never truly see past the monster. Then Lila was there, having followed despite orders. She moved past him to the hostages, kneeling beside them and removing their gags with gentle hands. It's okay, she told them softly. I know he seems scary, but he just saved your lives. King Lucian is one of the good ones. You're human. One of the women whispered. How can you with him? Because he's proven himself to me over and over. Lila looked back at Lucian with such open affection that something in his chest ached. Come on, let's get you somewhere safe. She helped the hostages to their feet, supporting them as they left the chamber. As she passed Lucian, she reached out and squeezed his hand briefly, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. He watched her go, this remarkable woman who'd hidden in his coffin and somehow stolen his heart, and felt the old loneliness recede a little further. The aftermath took days to sort through. Constantine's body was burned according to tradition. His name struck from the family records as befitted a traitor. His conspirators, and there were several, though none as highly placed, were arrested and tried. Some were executed, others imprisoned, a few pardoned based on evidence of coercion. Throughout it all, Lucian worked tirelessly, rebuilding the security his court had lost, strengthening alliances with loyal houses, sending carefully worded messages to the eastern courts making clear that any invasion would be met with absolute force. And through it all, Lila was at his side. She moved into his private chambers officially, though she kept the suite he'd given her that first night, maintaining the fiction of propriety even as everyone in court knew the truth. She helped with the investigation, her memory for details and understanding of the archives proving invaluable. She mediated between Lucian and the human servants, easing their fears and helping them see their king as protector rather than predator. She made him laugh, made him hope, made him remember what it was to feel truly alive despite being technically dead. A week after Constantine's execution, Lucian was working late in his study when Lila appeared in the doorway wearing one of his shirts and little else, her hair loose around her shoulders. You're still working, she said, not quite a question. There's much to do. There's always much to do. You're immortal. It'll still be there tomorrow. She crossed to him, gently taking the papers from his hands. Come to Lila. That wasn't a request, Your Majesty. He raised an eyebrow. You're getting very bold with your king. My king is getting very bad at taking care of himself. She tugged his hand, pulling him to his feet. You're still healing. You need rest. I don't need, but she was kissing him, and his protest died. When she pulled back, he sighed in surrender. Fine. But only because you're incredibly persuasive. I know. She led him to the bedroom, and he followed like a tame predator, thinking how thoroughly she'd conquered him. Later, lying in bed with her curled against his chest, her heartbeat steady beneath his palm, Lucian found himself speaking thoughts he'd never meant to voice. I've been thinking about your mortality, she stirred. That's not ominous at all. I'm serious. You're human. You'll age. Eventually you'll die and I'll still be here. His arms tightened around her. I can't bear the thought of losing you. We have options, she said carefully. I've been reading about them in the archives. Vampiric transformation. It's possible, if both parties consent. It's also dangerous. The transformation kills as often as it succeeds, and even if it works, there's no guarantee you'd retain your humanity, your personality. You could become someone else entirely, or I could become someone who can stay with you forever. He kissed her temple. I won't pressure you. This decision has to be entirely yours. But know that whether you stay human or choose transformation, I want you with me for as long as possible. Even though I'm pushy and don't follow orders, especially because of that. He could hear the smile in his own voice. You're unlike anyone I've ever known, Lila Vane. You challenge me, you make me better. You broke into my coffin and changed everything. She laughed softly. Best hiding place I ever chose, indeed. They were quiet for a while and Lucian thought she'd fallen asleep. Then her voice came, small and uncertain. If I did choose transformation, would you be the one to turn me? His heart, usually so still, seemed to skip. It would be my honor. But also my terror. If something went wrong, then we'd face it together. She turned in his arms to look at him directly. I'm not saying I've decided, but I want you to know I'm considering it, that I want a future with you badly enough to risk it. He cupped her face in his hands, studying every detail, the hazel eyes, the constellation of freckles across her nose, the lips that smiled so readily despite everything she'd been through. I love you, he said simply. Whether you transform or stay human, whether we have 50 years or 500, I love you too. She kissed him softly. My vampire king who woke up to find me in his coffin. My brave archivist who chose the one hiding place in the entire Undercroft that would keep her safe. They held each other as night deepened around them, and Lucian felt a peace he hadn't known in centuries. The future was uncertain, it always was, but for the first time in longer than he could remember, he looked forward to it. 2 months passed in what felt like moments. The Undercroft returned to its normal rhythms, though with improved security and a renewed sense of unity. The crisis had reminded everyone what they stood to lose through internal division. Lila had become a fixture in the court, respected for her role in uncovering the conspiracy, and loved for her kindness to both vampire and human staff. She continued her work in the archives, now promoted to senior archivist, and spent her free time with Lucian learning about vampire culture, debating politics, occasionally scandalizing the older nobles with her casual affection toward their king. They were in his private gardens one evening when she brought it up again. "I've made my decision," she said, sitting beside him on a stone bench. "About transformation," his whole body tensed. "And I want to do it. Not now, maybe in a year or two. I want time to say goodbye to my human life properly, to tie up loose ends. But yes," she met his eyes steadily. "I want forever with you, Lucian, however long that is." Relief and fear warred in his chest. "You're certain? Once it's done, there's no reversing it." "I'm certain. I've read every account in the archives, consulted with vampires who've undergone successful transformations, even talked to the court physician about the process and risks." She took his hand. "I know what I'm choosing, and I'm choosing you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'll make sure everything is perfect, the best conditions, the safest methods, every possible advantage. I know you will. You've been protecting me since the moment I woke you, and I'll continue protecting you. Forever." She pulled back to grin at him. "That's very romantic and also slightly overbearing. I approve." He laughed, that rare full laugh she'd learned to coax from him. "You've made me soft. You were never soft. Just lonely." There's a difference. She was right, as she so often was. He'd been lonely for centuries, going through the motions of ruling without truly feeling connected to anyone or anything. And then a terrified human woman had hidden in his coffin, and suddenly he had a reason to care again. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For choosing me. For staying. For making my very long life interesting again. You're welcome. Now kiss me before you get too sentimental." He obliged, pulling her close and kissing her until they were both breathless. The garden around them was quiet except for the sound of water from a nearby fountain and the distant echo of life in the Undercroft. A year later, they performed the transformation ceremony in the deepest chamber of the Undercroft, witnessed only by Darius and the court physician. It was a risk they both understood, but Lucian had prepared obsessively, ensuring every detail was perfect. He held Lila in his arms as he bit down on her throat, her blood flooding his mouth with warmth and life and the taste that was uniquely hers. Then he fed her his own blood, ancient and powerful, and prayed to gods he no longer believed in that it would work. The transformation took 3 days. 3 days of fever and pain, of Lila's body dying and being reborn as something new. Lucian never left her side, holding her through the convulsions, whispering encouragement when she screamed, refusing to believe anything but success. On the 3rd night her eyes opened, silver now, like his. Her skin had paled to alabaster, her features sharpened to ethereal beauty. But when she looked at him, he saw recognition and relief and love. "It worked," she breathed, her voice slightly different but still essentially hers. "You're here," he said, and realized he was crying, something vampires could do but rarely bothered with. "You're still you." "Did you doubt it?" "Every moment. I've never been so terrified in my entire existence." She sat up slowly, testing her new body, and smiled. "I feel everything, so much sharper. I can hear your heart, I can smell the age of the stone around us. It's overwhelming. It will be for a while, but you'll adapt." He helped her stand, steadying her. "How do you feel otherwise?" "Hungry," she admitted. "Really hungry, is that normal?" "Completely. Come, I'll teach you to hunt." They spent the next weeks together as Lila adjusted to her new existence. Lucian taught her to control her strength, to hunt ethically, to navigate vampire society from a different perspective. She was a quick learner, adapting to immortality with the same determination she'd brought to hiding in his coffin. And through it all their love deepened. No longer constrained by mortal lifespan, they could plan truly long futures together, decades, centuries, millennia if they were fortunate. 5 years after that night in the coffin, they stood together on a balcony overlooking the Undercroft during a grand celebration. It was the anniversary of Constantine's defeat, now celebrated as Unity Day, a reminder that the court was strongest when it stood together. "Look at them," Lila said, watching vampires and humans mingling below in harmony. "You built this peace, this cooperation." "We built it," Lucian corrected. Your presence showed them it was possible, that humans and vampires could be true partners. I just hid in your coffin because I was terrified, and changed everything." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Best mistake you ever made." "Best decision," she corrected. "Somewhere in my panic, some instinct told me that Coffin was safe, that you would be safe. I didn't know it consciously, but something in me knew. Fate, perhaps. You believe in fate?" "After 1,000 years, I believe in very little. But I believe in us." She turned in his arms, her silver eyes meeting his. "Dance with me? Here now? Why not? We're immortal. We have all the time in the world. But right now, in this moment, I want to dance with my king on this balcony while our people celebrate below." He couldn't refuse her. He never could. They moved together in slow circles. No music except the sound of celebration drifting up from below. And Lucian marveled at how completely his life had changed. He'd been so alone for so long. Content with his duty, proud of his accomplishments, but ultimately isolated in the way that only the very old and very powerful could be. And then a human woman had slipped into his coffin room while fleeing from guards, and he'd woken to find her trembling in the darkness beside him. The single most fortunate awakening of his entire 1,000-year existence. "What are you thinking?" Lila asked, resting her head against his chest. "That I would live another 1,000 years of loneliness if it meant finding you at the end. That's ridiculously romantic-y. You bring it out in me." He tilted her face up, kissing her slowly. "I love you, Lila Vasilescu." He'd given her a new surname to go with her new life, Vas, meaning son of Basil in the old tongue adapted for her. It marked her as his, as family, as eternal. "And I love you, Lucian Dracămir, my king who woke to find me and kept me." They kissed again as night deepened around them, and celebration continued below. Two beings who by all logic shouldn't have found each other, shouldn't have worked, but who'd somehow become essential to each other's existence. The Undercroft thrived under their joint rule. Lucian brought ancient wisdom and strategic brilliance. Lila brought fresh perspective and genuine compassion. Together they ushered in an era of prosperity that would be remembered in vampire histories for centuries to come. But that was the future. Right now, in this moment, they simply held each other and swayed to music only they could hear, content in the knowledge that they had time, endless time, to build their forever. The guards that had chased Lila that first terrifying night were long dealt with. The conspiracies were unraveled. The threats were eliminated, and from the chaos and fear had emerged something neither of them had expected. A love that transcended species, that conquered death itself, that transformed a vampire king and a human archivist into partners who would face eternity together. All because she'd been desperate enough and brave enough to hide in a coffin. All because he'd been honorable enough and lonely enough to protect the trembling woman he found there. The best mistakes, Lila had said, were really decisions made by parts of ourselves wiser than our conscious minds. Looking at her now, his wife in all but the formal ceremony they'd eventually hold, his partner in rule, his companion through immortality, Lucian had to agree. Some things were simply meant to be, no matter how impossible they seemed, and their story was one of them. Years turned to decades, turned to centuries, and still they ruled together. The Undercroft became legendary for its peace and prosperity, a model that other vampire courts began to emulate. Humans and vampires worked together openly, bringing the strengths of both species to bear on problems neither could solve alone. But for Lucian and Lila, the grand achievements were secondary to the simple joy of existing together, of waking each night knowing the other was there, of sharing eternity with someone who understood both the darkness and the light, who'd seen each other at their worst, and loved despite it, or perhaps because of it. They never forgot that first night, when fear and chance and desperate courage had brought them together. It became their private anniversary, celebrated quietly between just the two of them, the night she'd slipped into his coffin room, the night he'd woken to find her, the night everything had changed, the night their forever began. And in the end, wasn't that what everyone wanted? Not the grand romance of legends, but the quiet certainty of having found someone worth waking for, worth protecting, worth choosing again and again across all the long years. They'd found it in the most unlikely way, but they'd found it nonetheless, and they would hold on to it forever.